Hello everyone. The European Neighbourhood Policy, or ENP, is a key element of the European Union's foreign policy framework. It aims to build strong relationships with countries on the EU's borders, fostering stability, security and prosperity in the regions close to the EU. In today's video, we'll break down what the European Neighbourhood Policy is, its goals, how it works, and the impact it has on both the EU and its neighboring countries. So, what exactly is the European Neighbourhood Policy? The ENP was launched in 2004, just after the EU's major enlargement that brought in 10 new member states from Central and Eastern Europe. The idea was to create a framework for the EU to engage with its neighbours to the east and south, who were not on the path to EU membership, but still had a strong interest in building closer ties with the rest of Europe. The ENP covers 16 countries split into two groups. That's the Eastern Partnership, with countries like Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova and Belarus, and the Southern Neighbourhood, which includes North African and Middle Eastern countries such as Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt and Jordan. The ENP's core idea is to offer these countries a closer relationship with the EU, politically, economically and socially, based on shared values like democracy, the rule of law, human rights and economic integration. In return, these countries commit to reforms and cooperation that align with EU standards. And now let's dive into the main goals of the European Neighbourhood Policy. One of the primary goals of the ENP is to promote stability in the EU's neighbourhood. And this means addressing threats like conflict, political instability, terrorism and organised crime. The EU sees its neighbours' security as directly linked to its own, so by helping these countries become more stable and secure, the EU aims to protect its own borders and citizens from external threats. For instance, the EU has provided substantial assistance to countries like Ukraine and Georgia, which have faced territorial conflicts and political instability. By supporting reforms in governance, the EU helps these countries strengthen their institutions and their resilience against internal and external pressure. A central aspect of the ENP is supporting political and economic reforms in neighboring countries. And this includes promoting democratic governance, human rights, and the rule of law. And the EU encourages its partners to hold free and fair elections, fight corruption, and strengthen their judicial systems. In return, the EU provides technical and financial assistance to help these countries implement reforms. And economic development is also a major focus. The ENP promotes market reforms, trade liberalizations, and investments that can help neighboring countries integrate more deeply with the EU single market. By improving their economic governance and their business environments, these countries can attract foreign investments and create jobs leading to long-term growth. The EU is one of the world's largest trading blocs, and through the ENP it offers its neighbours closer access to the single market. And while ENP countries do not receive full membership privileges, they are offered what's known as Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Areas, or DCFTAs. And these agreements go beyond traditional trade deals, aiming to align the economic rules of partner countries with EU regulations and standards. For example, Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia have all signed DCFTAs with the EU, which allow for tariff-free access to much of the EU market, while committing these countries to reforms in areas like intellectual property rights, competition policy and labour standards. And this not only benefits these countries economically, but also brings them closer to the EU in terms of economic governance. Another key goal of the ENP is to promote greater mobility between the EU and its neighboring countries. And this includes improving visa policies, academic exchanges, and cultural programs that bring people from both sides into closer contact. The idea is to build stronger ties at the human level, whether that's through student exchange programs like Erasmus Plus or by facilitating easier travel for business and tourism. Visa liberalization has been a particularly important aspect of the ENP for Eastern Partnership countries. For example, Ukraine and Georgia now enjoy visa-free travel to the EU for short stays, making it easier for their citizens to engage with Europe socially and economically. In today's interconnected world, many of the challenges facing the EU and its neighbors are global in nature, whether it's climate change, energy security, or migration. And the ENP aims to foster cooperation on these shared challenges. For example, the EU works with its neighbors to address climate change by encouraging the transition to renewable energy, improving energy efficiency, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The ENP also plays a role in managing migration, with the EU offering support to partner countries to better control their borders and address the root causes of migration, such as poverty and conflict. And now that we've covered the main goals, let's take a closer look at how the European Neighbourhood policy works in practice. The ENP is implemented through a set of agreements, frameworks, and financial instruments that guide cooperation between the EU and its partner countries. And that's why I have some of the key tools the EU uses to achieve its objectives under the ENP. Bilateral action plans are at the heart of the ENP's cooperation with individual countries. And these plans are agreed upon between the EU and the partner country and outline specific reforms, projects, and cooperation areas over a set period. That's usually 3 to 5 years. And each country's action plan is unique, reflecting its specific challenges, needs, and ambitions. In recent years, these have evolved into partnership priorities, which set more targeted and flexible cooperation goals in response to changes in the political or economic environment of a partner country. The European Neighbourhood Instrument, or ENI, is the primary financial tool of the ENP. Between 2014 and 2020, the ENI allocated over 15 billion euros to support projects in areas like governance, rule of law, energy, climate action, and economic development in the EU's neighboring countries. The financial assistance provided through the ENI is conditional, meaning that partner countries must meet specific reform benchmarks to receive continued support. And this creates an incentive for these countries to adopt the necessary political and economic reforms outlined in their action plans. Since 2021, the ENI has been replaced by the so-called Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, or NDICI, which consolidates various funding streams to make the EU's financial assistance more flexible and also responsive to crises. As mentioned earlier, trade agreements, particularly those deep and comprehensive free trade areas, or DCFTAs, are one of the cornerstones of the ENP's economic goals. Through these agreements, the EU helps partner countries align their economies with EU standards, which in turn creates new trade opportunities and fosters economic integration. The EU also signs broader association agreements with some ENP countries. And these agreements cover not only trade, but also political dialogue, security cooperation, and cultural exchanges, further strengthening ties between the EU and its neighbors. A crucial aspect of the ENP is its focus on engaging civil society. The EU works directly with NGOs, grassroots organizations, and local communities in partner countries to promote democratic governance, but also human rights and inclusive economic development. Through programs like Erasmus Plus, the EU also promotes educational exchanges allowing students and young professionals from ENP countries to study in EU institutions and vice versa. And this helps foster cultural understanding and builds long-term connections between Europe and its neighboring countries. So, what has the ENP achieved so far, and what challenges does it face? One of the ENP's notable successes has been its ability to support democratic transitions and economic reforms in certain countries. In places like Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, the EU's financial and technical assistance has been instrumental in driving political and economic modernization. The ENP has also played a significant role in stabilizing countries affected by conflict or political crises. The EU's response to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, for example, so Russia's war, has included significant financial aid, sanctions on Russia, and support for political reforms in Ukraine. Similarly, the EU has provided assistance to North African countries in their efforts to manage the aftermath of the Arab Spring and the ongoing challenges of migration and security. However, the ENP also faces significant challenges, and one of the biggest issues is that not all ENP countries share the same commitment to reforms or to democratic values. Countries like Belarus, for example, have shown little interest in political reforms, while others like Libya and Syria have been destabilized by ongoing conflict, making it difficult for the EU to engage effectively. Another challenge is balancing the EU's strategic interest with its values. For example, in dealing with authoritarian governments or countries with poor human rights records, the EU sometimes finds itself in a difficult position. It wants to maintain stability and cooperation in these regions, but also promote democratic principles and human rights. Looking ahead, what does the future hold for the European Neighbourhood policy? Well, the ENP will likely continue to evolve to respond to the changing geopolitical landscape. One key focus will be on dealing with the ongoing challenges in Eastern Europe, particularly in Ukraine and Belarus, where political tensions and conflict persist. The EU will need to find ways to support these countries in their aspirations for democracy and reform, while managing its relationship with Russia somehow. In this southern neighborhood, the ENP will continue to play a crucial role in addressing migration, security threats, and economic challenges in North Africa and the Middle East. As climate change, resource shortages, and population pressures increase, the EU's engagement with this region will become even more critical. The ENP will also need to adapt to the growing importance of global challenges like climate change, digitalization, and public health. The EU has already begun working with its neighbors on these issues, but they will become even more central to the policy's goals in the coming years. So, in conclusion, the European Neighbourhood policy is a vital tool in the EU's efforts to build strong relationships with its neighbours, promoting stability, security, and shared prosperity. While it faces significant challenges, the ENP has also achieved important successes in driving political and economic reforms, supporting democratic transitions, and fostering closer ties between the EU and its neighbors. As we look to the future, the ENP will need to remain flexible and responsive to a rapidly changing world, but its core goals of fostering cooperation, stability, and shared values will remain central to the EU's foreign policy approach. So thank you for watching, and if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more discussions on European politics and some global affairs. And feel free to leave your thoughts on the ENP and its future in the comments below. And the next video is right here in the end screen.